Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Good morning, and welcome to the open door on this feast of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. Joining us today, Rhonda Shervin, Catholic philosopher and prolific author, Ed Rushman, a consultant, and we need a lot of consulting going on, and he's been doing a lot of work in Orange County, oftentimes in the healthcare area, and he's also a candidate for a seat in Congress, United States Congress. And Mr. John Green, who's added so much over the past several weeks, who is a student, a serious student, and all of us should be serious students. I'm Jim Hannick, and I'm glad to welcome our panel and to welcome our listeners. On this Feast of the Immaculate Conception, I have one or two reflections to make. The first is that the Immaculate Conception, Blessed Mother conceived without original sin, is a prelude to so much, a prelude certainly to the Annunciation. And a friend of mine recently sent me a message, and others as well, and in that message we have the following. When there are annunciations in our lives, painful as some may be, let us open the door, give ourselves fully to the Lord, that He may work through us for the salvation of souls. Let us not allow the doors to close or the pathways to vanish. May our hearts remain always open to all that God has in store. And then the friend added a poem by excellent, recently deceased American poet Denise Levertov. And I'd like to read the short last stanza of that poem. Mary did not cry, I cannot, I am not worthy, nor I have not the strength. She did not submit with gritted teeth, raging, coerced. Bravest of all humans, consent illumined her. The room filled with its light. The lily glowed in it, and the iridescent wings. Consent, courage unparalleled, opened her utterly. Well, those themes of openness to the Spirit and openness to the challenge of loving our God with our whole heart, our whole soul, and our whole mind are themes that we very much want to unite ourselves with in this panel as we move through the weeks. I'm sure, of course, that there's a jarring sense as we move from prayer to the work of a nascent and still tiny political party. But that's the way the world is. We're oftentimes jarred. And I'd like to look at, to start today, the preamble to the platform. We read it once upon a time, months ago, but I thought today we could again begin with it. We are a party that seeks the common good, on common ground, through common sense. We believe in the sanctity of human life, the necessity of social justice, our responsibility to care for the environment and the promotion of a more peaceful world. We cherish the individual rights and separation of government powers protected by the United States Constitution and recognize the need for social supports and community cohesion as modeled by a number of European governments and movements. We seek to bridge the bitter partisan divide with principled policies and respectful dialogue. I'm going to ask Rhonda to comment first because she's been steadfast in moving us from general claims to the most particular of particulars. Now, with the preamble, Rhonda, we're certainly with the general claims, but you've seen some of the particular particulars. Any thoughts on this preamble second time around?
Okay. I think my difficulty is I've explained many times, but some of the people on the panel are new. Oh dear, we're getting an echo.
Well, we'll work through it, and our producer, Sebastian Mahfoud, can do all sorts of wonderful things.
Afterwards, okay. In any case, one of the difficulties I have is that since I think like a philosopher, but I've never studied social philosophy that much, and I'm not into politics except for caring so much about pro-life. So then I look at a document like this and I pick at certain words, but maybe it's important just to have that contribution. So this time what leapt out at me was necessity of social justice. And I thought, suddenly came to mind the zealots at the time of Jesus and how the zealots would have said, yes, necessity of social justice. We've got to get rid of the Romans. See, and Jesus wasn't about that sense of social justice. Certainly he was for justice, okay? So I'm wondering if that word necessity is the best word there versus the promoting of social justice. I mean, I know you're trying to get across that in some cases it's obligatory. You see what I mean? You can just bounce it around if you like.
Ed, working on the ground as you are. What about that?
Working on the what?
On the ground, on the playing field, in the scrum of Orange County politics.
Yeah, I would like that better.
Yes, and the idea there, I think, is that, well, two things. One is that necessity in this sense, I think, is saying that a well-ordered society that protects life, that makes it possible, as C.S. Lewis once said, I'll paraphrase him, essentially the government's job is to make sure that two friends can go down to the pub and have a conversation.
Oh.
And if we're to have that kind of a life, the life where people can go and seek happiness not apart from seeking the happiness of others, but seeking a legitimate happiness, social justice is a necessity. However, at the same time, the monk Thomas Merton, and I know that people have mixed feelings on him, but he said some smart things, and one of them was, whenever you're going to say something, make some statement, you need to turn right around and say the opposite afterward. If you look in the gospel, you'll see that Jesus did that somewhat, where he'd say, keep it in secret, and then, proclaim it from the housetops, by the way. So the idea...
That's very good. So perhaps I know that there's a committee being set up to revise the platform, or I thought there was, but in any case, I'll leave it to you leaders to just, you can discuss this when you rewrite the platform.
And I think the idea here that the thing about it is that when I say the opposite, when we work for social justice, when we proclaim that it is necessary to have social justice in order to have a well-functioning society, the implication is that it has to be 100%, that we have to achieve some perfection. And like Dirty Harry said in one of the Clint Eastwood movies, a man's got to know his limitations. We have to know the bounds, and we don't know them precisely, but we have to know the limits of social justice that we can practically achieve with imperfect people. Because we will never be perfect.
That's not very good. Of course, in a platform, we don't want to stress limits. I can understand that.
I think so.
It's a big challenge to get it right, so it doesn't sound. I mean, my whole thing all along for the months we've been working on this is that I don't like it sounding utopian in some way.
Yeah.
Even though I'm totally committed to trying to do everything to achieve justice in my own life situations and so on and so forth, and in the country, especially on huge issues like the ones that we deal with in the party. So I would say work for social justice would be better.
I think the idea was. Oh, go ahead.
Let's see what John has to say on this.
Well, as far as social justice, that's a very important thing, and actually it's something that's being under attack at the moment. I'm not sure if you guys have been following this case, but it's this case where this Colorado Christian baker who was asked to create a cake for a gay wedding, and he refused to do it, and the couple sued him because they thought that was a violation of a non-discriminatory law of Colorado. So he lost the suit, he appealed it, lost that, and now it's at the Supreme Court, and it was just this week that the Supreme Court heard the case. So they're going to be rendering a judgment, they said sometime before June, so not a pretty long time. This case has been going on for over 5 years. So there's the justice of the couple, of their rights, being recognized as a gay couple, and then there's the right of the individual who's being forced into doing this. I'm not sure if you follow this case or not, but I have.
Yes. I think some of us certainly have been. It's being accepted now by the Supreme Court as enormously significant.
So it's whether is the court going to uphold the couple and their claims as to be synonymous with that right of a heterosexual couple, or are they going to uphold the right of the individual, of the artist essentially, and allow him his freedom to decline to do a job?
So social justice covers a lot of territory.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah.
Maybe what we could do is go ahead now to the second point on our agenda, our flexible agenda. And it reads, revisit a sampler of items from the various planks. And then I mentioned two, and what's the very first one? It's from the plank, religion in the public square. It reads, we therefore support the free exercise of religion as the right to fully live out the dictates of one's faith. We believe that there is more to the First Amendment's guarantee of the free exercise of religion than the mere freedom of worship. That directly connects to the case that John has brought up.
I do have problems with that wording in the sense, okay, suppose you have an ISIS group or a Satanist group. There are plenty of Satanist groups. and they were kind of religion. So are we going to define what religion means? I mean, I happen to be reading a book about the gunpowder plot and Elizabeth I in England at the moment. So, I mean, they claimed that simply the Elizabeth's ministers simply claimed that it was, against the Queen for anyone to be a Catholic because the Pope said you could resist laws that insisted that you go only to the Anglican Church, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, it makes it sound like the way the platform is stated, which was part of Al's problem, by the way. We had a member of this panel who dropped out eventually because he would like it to be a Christian party openly in that sense. Okay, so I just have trouble with just using the word religion as if all religions are wonderful and,
Ed, what do you think about that?
Well, I've already said what I think. I don't know how to handle it, but I think I just don't like a wording in anything that's so vague that it's.
Yes. Now, I was asking Ed if he'd like to respond to your issue there.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think there's two things to this. One is that, and I'm going to go back to limitations quite frequently all through this. With some things, there is the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. There's the letter of the platform, the spirit of the platform. When I look at freedom of religion, I probably look at it more as freedom of strongly held views and beliefs, more so than religion per se. So if somebody, for their own reasons, feels very strongly about something, and this is something actually we've practiced in my marriage, is that if somebody feels very, very strongly about something, the other one who feels less strongly will submit to some degree to the other person because they hold the stronger view. So if I were to go into a baker's shop and I wanted to order a cake to celebrate the anniversary of the American Solidarity Party, and the baker said, well, I'm a libertarian and I don't want to make a stinking American Solidarity cake. I think you got I can tell you, I have alternatives, and I'm going to say, I'm sorry you feel that way. I might ask him if he'd like to talk about it, but if he doesn't want to do it, if I have to, I'll make my own darn cake, because I don't think it's a great society when we're forcing people, when we're compelling people in matters that are not grave matters. They're not things that are terribly important. To force somebody to not commit murder is a reasonable coercion, and the full power of society is free to work on that. But when it comes to things like, I really wasn't dealing so much with the cake case, but it's a convenient way to look at it. When it comes to things like this, I don't want to compel an atheist to make the sign of the cross. I don't want to compel somebody that really, really hates bumper stickers to put a bumper sticker on their car. It's strongly held belief. When I see religion, I really think now we need to broaden that to strongly held belief, and then think about, is this matter worth compelling somebody over under penalties of law? It's respecting the individual and at the same time discovering together through organic law where those limits are.
Okay, so you had, way back when, you had, separation of blacks and whites into different public schools, and bathrooms. Was that a small issue that a black person couldn't go into a white bathroom?
Yes, so we could use that as an example, couldn't we? In a case like
No,
that,
but I mean, should the black person have continued to just say, well, I can just drive to a black bathroom so it doesn't matter?
and this is probably, I don't know if I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but there were lots of folks who were in an unjust system who chose not to fight it, and that was an individual choice. But at a federal, at a governmental level, at a legislative level, we don't have the freedom to say it's okay. That can only be decided by the individual. But as a group, we need to seek justice, and the reason that was fundamentally wrong was because it made a difference between two groups of people that were not really different. You know, they're both human beings, and the rights of the Constitution had to apply. So the idea of separate but equal and stuff like that was creating a division in our society that was completely artificial. And since this is a Catholic forum, sinful. You know, it was something that is not recognized by God. It's not something that we believe is right. So in that case, you have two things going on. The individual can deal with it according to their own way, whether they're Louis Armstrong doing it one way or Malcolm X doing another. But society, when we're making laws, we cannot allow the Constitution to be perverted. And that was a perversion of the Constitution to allow separate but equal. Even though
excuse me.
straightforward allowed it.
Excuse me, and I'm going to try to get John back into this conversation because we've got a troika at work here on this panel, and John got us started on this case. Plus, he's from Canada.
Well, I was in Canada, but I was born and raised here in the States. I'm in Chicago, but
well, you visited there. You visited there, so you can lend an international perspective.
A little bit. As far as the case, I think it was totally unnecessary for it to be taken to court. I mean, whatever happened to the idea of a boycott? You know, if you really have a business owner who is discriminating, truly discriminating, then instead of taking the person to law, you raise awareness, create a boycott, and either the owner, you know, sticks it up or he relents. So, and it's all within the principle of subsidiarity as well.
How does that work?
Subsidiarity is the basically keeping issues local and dealing with it at the lowest authority. But since the couple moved first in suing the baker or the artist, because he's actually really an artist. I've seen his website, seen his work. He's a genius. But they, you know, instead of just dealing with it at the discussion level and just recognizing that he has a right to choose his customers and to choose what he's going to create through his art. But instead, they took it to law, and then he was basically forced into appealing it and ultimately bringing it up to the Supreme Court. So there's an example here of a violation of the principle of subsidiarity, and it was initiated, you know, by this couple who simply just wouldn't take no for an answer. You know, like what our candidate had said here, they could have just either made their own cake or they could have gone somewhere else. Instead, they want to make a big issue out of it because they're trying to make a statement.
There are, yes, I see that line. And thinking about Ed's New Testament reflection earlier on, there is something, isn't there, in the New Testament where our Lord says it would be better to settle before you go to court. Settle before you even get to court. So there's a subsidiarity issue there. And I'm thinking now of Rhonda and Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder plot and all of that. Certainly, one can't plead freedom of religion and the exercise of religion to overthrow by force the government, and even if the government is profoundly compromised, as was the government of Queen Elizabeth, there's the element of violence that can't be overlooked. In fact, that was the key consideration in the gunpowder plot. Now, if we fast forward to the religious freedom context in our country, the Freedom of Religion Act of 1992, I think that's the right date, acknowledges that there can be cases where people who are convinced of a certain religion think that their exercise of it would require them to directly attack the government. And the Freedom of Religious Act excludes this. What it does say is that the least restrictive measure be used in curtailing any free exercise of religion, that the least restrictive means be used. So we have the classic. We have the classic.
When they take away our tax-exempt status because we don't do gay marriage in the church, that's the least restrictive.
I missed the lead into that. When they take away our
when they take away our tax-exempt status as a Catholic church because we don't do gay marriage someday.
Yes,
that's less restrictive than killing us, of course.
That's right, and even less restrictive would be allowing us to continue with our prohibition on homosexual unions. That would be less restrictive still.
The point behind all these extreme examples that I give, the point is what I'm really questioning is, can you write the platform using words that don't have the same meaning for half the population? So if you use the word religion, if you use words in such a way, that's my problem.
Yes, no, I think that's a legitimate and ongoing concern, and yet we know that in any governmental system there are going to be ambiguities in the law, and there's going to be a judicial scrutiny of all of these things. I don't know of any way to free us from the necessity of constitutional law. And I always used to tease students back in the day. There were two huge books that were carted around by students. One was Norton's Anthology of English Literature, a huge book, and the other was a huge textbook on constitutional law. I don't know how it is that there could be a constitution or a platform that wouldn't require the kind of scrutiny that's involved in the discipline of constitutional law. But while we sometimes go nowhere there, we sometimes do go somewhere there. And for example, when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses and their children receiving a blood transfusion, we don't say, nor should we ever say, that Jehovah's Witnesses ought not to be able to practice any of their religious positions, but we do say there are limits. We're not going to let a child die because the child is not allowed to have a blood transfusion. And here, in the case of the cake artist, there are any number of places that a person can have a cake baked. And it's not as if somebody's freedom or the structure of the government is somehow imperiled by the business of an individual saying, sorry, I can't do this for you. And in a way, there's a comparison, pretty clear comparison, between another case the Supreme Court has just accepted. The case starts here in California of pro-life pregnancy centers being required by law to have large font signs advertising where abortions can be secured. This requirement is wholly unnecessary. There are, after all, websites and even telephone books and ads everywhere in the public sector indicating where one can go to secure an abortion. It's hardly necessary to invade and coerce speech in pro-life pregnancy centers. Another case now before the Supreme Court. Well,
right.
Sorry for the rant.
No. I understand what you're saying, but I still think that there's a difficulty.
Yes, there sure is. The drafting of language is forever and ever, and we philosophers know that there have been any number of attempts to understand the structure of language that make language far too atomistic. This isn't something that a lot of people are worried about, but the early Wittgenstein had a picture theory of language. Every word referred to something that could be pictured, and that way you'd get crystal clarity. Except he went on to say, no, I don't think that's right. Language is more like what we find in a city like Rome. There are old roads, there are older roads, there are ancient roads, there are new roads, there are new buildings, there are old buildings, and sometimes the zoning makes sense and sometimes it doesn't, and that's the way our language is. Keeps the wordsmiths busy. But we could test all of this if we go to the second item for review. Nothing could be more topical than this from the health and welfare plank. We therefore support diverse efforts to secure universal health care access, affordability, and outcomes, including a single-pay health initiative, or rather single-pay health initiatives, healthcare cooperatives, and hybrid systems at the state and national level. Now let me say that one more time. It's not that long. We therefore support diverse efforts to secure universal health care access, affordability, and outcomes, including single-pay health initiatives, healthcare cooperatives, and hybrid systems at the state and national level. Now, Ed, I'm going to ask you, because you've done a lot of work in the healthcare area. What do you make of this?
Well, to be fair, full disclosure here, I've been working in healthcare only for a few years now because my work goes across all industries. I've worked in a dozen different industries over time. But it's an interesting thing. In the first place, whatever we do in promoting healthcare, we have to allow for the current back and forth swinging wildly from left and right. If we were to put in a really beautiful national healthcare system, and I have some really good ideas on that, but if we do that, we always have to understand that it can be turned from a place of healing and, health for the whole nation to an Auschwitz. I mean, it's all it takes is an election, and all of a sudden it becomes an abortion mill and a euthanasia mill and a place to eliminate all the undesirables in society. So that's limitation. Limitations are my theme today. That's one of my things, is to understand whatever we do, we have to build it in a modest way that achieves solid aims and at the same time isn't easily used by people that have evil intentions. So I think that's my first thought, Jim, is that's my main concern, is whatever we do, we have to understand and anticipate how it can be perverted later and then build it with safeties. Our founding fathers did that with the Constitution. Even though we've got problems, they really did a pretty good job preparing for a future that they couldn't even see.
Okay. I'm just wondering, because I'm 80 years old and I forget everything I read the next day or the next hour. So I can't remember. Do we have something in the platform about abortifacient contraceptives?
Not specifically, though that phrase isn't used, but we definitely have something in the platform, very strong something, that we support the right to life from conception.
Right. But most
all the way through.
There again, that's very vague. We have probably now millions of babies being pushed out of the womb by abortifacient contraceptives. And, well, it's not, is it not prudent for the party to say anything about this?
I think that something could very well be said, like abortion and abortifacient contraceptives. So we could use both. I mean, when there's some doubt, then that doubt should be directly answered. Non-surgical abortions are an enormous dimension of the abortion holocaust.
Okay, well, that would be very good, but I realize it would alienate probably those people who would join the party. I mean, there are plenty of Christians who don't think that way about contraception.
Well, the National Right to Life Committee doesn't think that way itself. That's the long-standing, oftentimes very effective, incrementalist in approach, but it pretty studiously avoids saying anything about contraception, precisely to not drive away people who might otherwise support it, and I think as well because a number of people that are influential in the National Right to Life Committee aren't opposed to contraception.
Very.
John, I got to get back to you.
I kind of wonder if it would make a difference if the wording was changed. While the party supports life beginning at conception to natural death, would it clear things up? And I'm probably posing this to Dr. Shervin. What if the wording was changed to natural conception to natural death? Would that make a difference?
Well, but, I mean, the thing is, if you want to have a party where the words or the platform is so vague that we don't alienate people, it makes it very vague. How many people are going to look at that and think it means, I'm thinking of it in terms of the health plan. Does the health plan the health plans that we're going to support, suppose they have, free access to abortifacient pills? We're not even going to mention this stuff. Yay? Is that the idea?
No, I was just thinking, would it clear things up as a pro-life party?
I don't think it would clear things up because no one would think of that corollary.
Okay. No, I was just wondering, just seeing, because I agree with you that there is a level of ambiguity within the party's platform, which an element of ambiguity gives a certain amount of license for interpretation, but it could also work against you. I wonder if because it can be misinterpreted as well. So much for my attempt to try to clear this thing up. I kind of wonder though, with this whole platform, that a lot has to be assumed. The person reading it, the people who put this together, I wonder if they are just assuming that the person reading it already has most of these platforms in mind. They're just on paper in front of them.
I think, John, that question leads us, by way of easy and natural transition, as one of my old teachers used to say, to the third point on our agenda, consider the promise and peril. Consider the promise and peril of building a national party. And I know Ed has thought a lot about this. And one of the perils is that the party could tear itself apart in the process of becoming a national party. I think of the analogy of how many small businesses do pretty well until they try to expand. And on the one hand, their thinking is if we don't expand, we're not going to be able to survive. And then when they try to expand, they go out of existence because they can't deal with the expansion. And I know, and we don't need to air dirty laundry in public, but we could, that there's a day-by-day back and forth within the membership of the Solidarity Party on many of the points that have been raised in our discussion here this morning. And I know that Ed has followed that very closely. I'm not asking you, Ed, to address any particular point other than the promise and peril of working on such issues and taking into account Orange County, Los Angeles County, South Texas, and Chicago, and the whole nation. What do you make of these worries?
Since limitations is my theme for the day, the thing is that the worry is that people will think that what they're making is everything, and that everything that is good can be written into a platform and executed, and not really allowing for the fundamental messiness of human life. And the second thing is that in everything, if you're going to work with that, I've made a career for decades now of working in less than perfect situations and getting great results. Oh, I have no idea what that was.
No one does. It could be Russian hackers.
Probably. When I work in these situations, I accept the imperfection and then try to preserve the spirit of cooperation and the spirit of heading toward a goal that maybe we don't see 100%, and being content for it to take time and being content for it to be always a work in progress, and yet really achieving real goals. So in something like this, you inevitably will get people that say, I have to have it right now. I have to see the results right now, or else what? Or else I have not felt satisfied. And that's the other thing in this is it's about self-interest. It's the self-interest that kills movements. It's when somebody's self-esteem, when their desire to do something with their life, their ennui, their own frustrations get expressed in political activity, and they're now in it to make themselves feel good, to create a legacy, or to put their mark on the world, and not to do the business of government, to speak for what's right, and to help us continue on reacting to what comes new, calmly, working out what we have to do, understanding that new challenges will come, and doing it for the people and not doing it just for themselves to feel good.
As in a career in politics.
There are some that are selfless and really, I don't know any, but there are some that are selfless.
Rumor.
I could do it I think I could do it for a very long time. I would either get sick of it and quit, or I would do it well, because that's just me. My personal faults don't tend to fall toward political sins, if you will. My personal faults deal with other areas that we won't go into right now, because nobody has their stole on and nobody's ordained. But the point is...
Just a second, I think we have somebody calling in, even now.
Oh, there is one for me.
No. That's a joke. That's a joke. Go ahead.
But the idea there is that we lack patience. We want it, and we want it now. We want instant gratification. And if there's one place where you don't get instant gratification, it's politics. If you get instant gratification in politics, you're doing it wrong. It's increments, it's getting it right and trying very hard. You know, somebody said, I'll close with this and let you move on to the next, but somebody said every problem was somebody else's solution to a problem.
Gosh.
I keep thinking of this line, politics is the art of the possible. So I think that's one reason I don't go into politics, because I'm into absolutist, obligatory ethics, not possible kind of thing. But because of all you, I'm getting the idea, and I'm seeing, of course, you can't say, well, unless, I mean, take the issue we were discussing. If I would say, well, I'm going to drop out of the party because it's not going to mention abortifacient contraceptives on the platform, suppose I would say that, or unless they do. Well, that would be saying it doesn't matter what's possible now, the platform has to be an absolutist list for an ethics text, right? Something like that. Is that what you mean?
Sorry, yes.
I know you heard that. I know you heard that. I know you're trying to formulate an answer. Go for it.
So, yeah, and that's part of it. When we talk about patience, there's patience in sense of time, and there's also patience in giving other folks time to work through things, and also making practical decisions. I think practicality is something that I see lacking sometimes in newer parties that start up, not just the American Solidarity Party, but I see where it's trying to get from step A to step Z with no intermediate steps. And the thing that gets said a lot of the time, actually one of my pet projects has been the DREAM Act of 2017 and getting that through, which has been absolutely, apparently so far, impossible to get done. And part of the problem with it is that the Democratic Party wants to look like they back it, but they don't. They don't want it to pass because they lose their hostages. That's my opinion. But the key thing here is one of the ways they market that is when somebody talks about the DREAM Act, they have people that say, if you are for this, you know, this is to the people that are trying to get in the DREAM program, if for this, you are criminalizing your parents. The ethical thing to do is to refuse DACA and don't take part in it because you're making you're hurting your parents by doing it. It's a very twisted logic, and it's part of that impractical, impatient type of thing. We must either legalize everyone, document everyone, or it's unethical for anyone to get any benefit. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think it's impractical. I think it's unfair. I think it's manipulative. But it's also very, very normal political practice, is to insist on the whole, because as long as you insist on the whole, you delay it, and you can continue being the justice warrior because you never actually complete the revolution. Some people love revolution a lot more than they love the freedom the revolution was supposed to bring.
All right. Now, John, what do you think about that line of analysis?
Yeah, I think our candidate has, a very good point there that, politics is a pretty thankless job, when we think of it in the long run. People you're not really appreciated when you're in office, but when you're out, people like you because they don't like the person who's in there right now. So with that mindset, I could see where it's very difficult to think long term when it comes to making decisions, either for the party or for, a nation in general. So, it kind of begs the question whether, if we should stick to short-term politics where they put in solutions to fix the short term, keep everybody happy, keep everybody moving, in one sense, or do you think long term, make unpopular decisions where people despise you, but later on they like you.
Difference maybe between a statesman and a politician. Here are a few thoughts. Guess I'm going to give myself a turn here. One is this, back to the New Testament. We have the parable, familiar parable of someone growing a crop and then someone planting weeds in the crop. And the first suggestion is, should we cut it all down? And in the parable, the person representing the Lord says, no, if you cut it all down, look what you will have lost. Let's let it grow up, keep an eye on it, and at the end we'll try to separate things out as best we can. That's a very broad directive, and I think you could say it's an anti-zealot position. The zealot would say, off with their heads, all of them, whether the heads be heads of wheat or heads of weeds. And so we have the, I think, scriptural injunction to wait and watch. We had the beginning of Advent, the gospel ended with watch, so watch. There's plenty to watch for. Now, if I could, I'd like to do a switch from the New Testament to Aristotle, and that's the sort of switch that Thomas Aquinas does all the time. In Aristotle, when we come to talk about politics, the understanding of politics, and this needs to be stressed regularly, is far wider than our current understanding of politics as electoral politics. In Aristotle, politics has to do with how we can act jointly to promote the common good. And one of the things that Aristotle wants to say about politics is, and this is a surprise, is that it's the most embracing of all the disciplines. The most embracing of all the disciplines. Oftentimes today we hear the word politics and we want to run. It's the most divisive of all the human enterprises. Aristotle wants to say, we can't run from politics. It's the most embracing of all the disciplines, of all the human enterprises. Now, Aristotle didn't have the revelation that we have, but he did have something that I think is absolutely right. We have to, in some way, all of us participate in advancing the common good. And the common good, central to Aristotle, is absolutely central to the American Solidarity Party. And the common good is not understood there as the majority. It's understood as everyone. At the same time, given today's narrowing, and so often our contemporary discourse is weakened by the narrowing and the eviscerating of key concepts, given the narrowing of politics to electoral politics, that's certainly not the case that all people have to be focused on electoral politics. Dorothy Day, and there's a Dorothy Day caucus within the American Solidarity Party. Dorothy Day was a suffragette, and in later years was asked, so who are you voting for? And she replied, so far, nobody. Because nobody, in her estimation, had a real commitment to the common good. Now, how to tie this together, part of our work in the American Solidarity Party is expanding the very concept of what politics is and what its end is. But it's not as if we in the party sprang full-blown from the head of Zeus. we come out this miserable stew that we have. And so we have our work cut out from us in more ways than one. We have external problems and we have internal problems. That's a little of Aristotle. Does that obfuscate or maybe a little bit of illuminate?
Yes, that's very helpful. That's very helpful.
Well, Ed, what are your next steps then? Your next steps at the level of the campaign, and we have not just Ed, we have Desmond Silvera, who's taking children to school right now, and we have our friend to the north, Brian Carroll, who's in the trenches right now. He's a man of mature years, as I like to say, who teaches full-time junior high. He's also a candidate. But Ed, you're on the show. What are your next steps over the next few weeks?
Well, to quote Mr. Spock in one of the Star Trek movies, each one responds according to their gifts. Desmond and Brian and I each have, in a sense, slightly different near-term objectives. For Desmond, it's more about promoting the ASP and get those ideas out. For me, it's actually really trying to win the office. And I think for me, I'm trying to get, and by the way, I'm going to send you a mail and ask you for some of those quotes, because I want to use those. But I think for me, it's trying to get people to see the choices that they're making, to hold up a mirror to the American people and to the people of my district and say, who are you really? What are you really asking for? Is what you're getting what you're asking for? Are you not happy with it? Then maybe you need to think about asking for something else. Because right now, it looks like you want someone with lots of money behind them, somebody that's essentially an investment banker, that's what it says they are, and you want somebody that behaves in the way that they do. If you deny that, then you have to ask, why did you vote for this? And if you say you didn't have a choice, now the choice is before you. It's a little bit messianic. The choice is before you all, and by the choice you make in this election, starting with this primary, you will say who you are. Who do you want to be? And it's a bit philosophical, I suppose, for a political campaign. We don't get that very often. But I think for me, it's really just trying to expose the choice and get them to really think. And that's I'm told that's an impossible goal. Maybe it is, but Don Quixote rides again.
John, is he off on a windmill bashing expedition?
Well, I have to admit, I was thinking of that film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where
yeah,
Jefferson Smith, he's trying to to battle all the corruption that goes on there. But this quote that sticks out to me, though, like the secretary basically told him he could do it. She said it's a 40-foot dive, but I think you can do it. And I kind of have to say the same thing. So.
Rhonda? Your last thought? We're down to 2 minutes.
I liked what he said very much. I like what you said very much.
Now, no matter what we say, or almost no matter what we say, there is a precedent. Once upon a time, in a major election, there was a popular book with the title, A Choice, Not an Echo. A choice, not an echo. It seems to me that Ed is offering us that. Well, Rhonda, 1 minute left. Could you close in prayer for us?
Bless our valiant candidate, bless all of us, and bless the American Solidarity Party. Amen.
Amen. And again, we are welcoming this blessed feast of the Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception paves the way for the Annunciation, and the Annunciation illustrates with extraordinary powers what it is to have an open door, open to the Spirit, open to each other, and how difficult it can be to keep that door open every day. Open it every day, keep it open. Thank you very much. That's it for today.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.